Hello, everybody. Uh, what weird times, man. Those days are so long being home. Let me just share my screen here.
Groundhog Day, Chris.
Oh, Jesus, man. Every day.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so my plan for today. I mentioned that I would be exploring some of the other maps, but we have to start looking at eyes as well. So I'm gonna try starting with eyes and then try to get through that today, and then move on into it's like whatever we can fit at the end, maybe like some of the textures and stuff. I can just share this with you guys. Those are some of the tests I'm doing over the day today, like with the old lady. Uh, like a big crash happened today. I was like in the zone, basically like painting the colors for the maps and everything. I did another pass. That was a big pass, and then it crashed and ate like an hour and a half of my work. So this is like what I had before, and then this one is after I redid some of the pass. But then obviously it's a totally different lighting setup. But you're gonna see like one thing I wanna you guys just like ignore for now, like the skin tone, because I have to keep painting this. But it's just like the light in terms of like how the speck in the surface is going to behave depending on the type of light. So all of those here, those renders are rendered with the same skin shader. But check this out. So this one, like how shiny things are going, it's kind of nice. But look at this one here, slightly different, right? Then we get to this one here, you get a little bit sharper because of kind of like a it's like pretty much like the lips. You can see the reflection in there that you cannot see that much around here or there. Just a little bit in this one. And then you get to this one. It's a very global illumination, right? Like everything is kind of cloudy and foggy in there. And then it goes very velvety and not so much speck at all, right? So it's always a matter of like testing under different situations. Another thing is the skin tone, right? Like look how much like it's picking some of the green from the environment in here. This one's getting a little red, right? This one, it's a little bit more of the natural side of things, kind of like outdoors in there, kind of midday probably. This one, picking up some of the blue tones and not speck at all. This one's a little bit warmer and has a lot of diffuse speck as well. So it's not like picking up like the super sharp speck. It's picking up in the eyes in there, but not so much in the skin. So it's very sensitive, We have to find always like a cool balance between, the type of speck that you're getting according to the environment, It's very hard to actually make it work across the board for all kinds of environments. For example, you're going to get like some sunny light like this. And this one, I believe I had to actually underexpose it a little bit because it was blowing up like the whole thing. But yeah, I'm going to keep exploring this and then tweaking my shader as I go, One thing that I did yesterday, you remember getting all those green spots everywhere in the skin, right? And what I did, I actually tweaked my subsurface, the scatter color. I can show you what I have here so far. So if I look at the model itself and I go to the radius, remember the radius was pretty saturated before, right? So I was reading online, and they say like two things can happen. Either like the scale is too big or too small, right? Like probably too big. It can create like all those green things, and or your model is out of scale or something like that. It's like you're using a weird scale in there, or just to saturate the subsurface radius. And it's funny because I never noticed that was that saturated before. Like, of course, I noticed like it was kind of reddish. But then I followed that advice and I brought it, like they say, like kind of bring under like the halfway saturation basically, right? So somewhere from here, the middle point down would be kind of ideal based on some, like a conversation I read online. And I tried that. And even though I reduced it quite a lot, I still get the redness in there. So that's pretty cool. It's like that means like you can go with a very desaturated color to prevent the green stuff from happening. And you still get the tint, So for example, let's see what it has around there, right? Like still get the nice little redness in there. And the eyes got more natural now. Obviously here everything looks very silicone and plasticky because I don't have enough detail, right? I'm still focusing on the secondary forms in here and not breaking things up. But you have to understand that a lot of this stuff here that it's really very plasticky. it's going to start looking more natural as soon as I start breaking the surface with more wrinkles and other things. But it's cool to see that, you know, like just like even with the desaturated color, you still get a nice, and it's actually more natural, you know. It's like before it was kind of glowy. It has a little bit more of, you know, it's a little bit more subtle now. Just cannot wait to actually break up this thing to make it look nicer. But yeah, so try that. If you're getting like that green tint, just like try to desaturate it and play with the values in there, you know. But that's it for now. So let's just move on to the eye stuff. I'm gonna open it here in ZBrush. That's my old lady with the color everywhere. Basically, like I just painted the rest in there, but still like very plain color. There's not a lot of variation at this point. I just basically like finished, like cover the entire thing with a certain color, and I have to iterate and add more of those variations from that point on. But this is basically what's being used in the render, you know, with the loose stripes in there. But I'm gonna be actually doing a better job if eventually, like just like breaking up this stuff. And I introduced a little bit more greens from yesterday, so around the eyes in here, so a little bit of green in here, still kind of like green yellow desaturated, and yeah, and a little bit more, you know, it's like a red and desaturated red around the lips to match a little bit of that tone, but not so much. So yeah, that's basically what I have so far. And the material here is the skin shade, the tweaked one. But if I switch back to my basic material, it looks darker like this. So yeah, she's saved. So let me just open another scene here. Let's open one of those eyes. All right, so eye. Let's look at this. Do some more work on the likeness as well. She's looking a little bit more like the lady now. But yeah, I'm gonna keep going with that. So for the eyes, so basically like the way I approach the eyes, I try like two different ways. There was basically one with the 3 objects and the other one with 4 objects. And I'm gonna show you what's the difference. So let's open. Yeah, I'm constantly trying things, you know, and I wish I had more time to try more, but you know, let's see, all eyes, there's one. So anything like, you know, it's like someone asked me the other day, like, I thought you had like a skin shader you can reuse. And I was like, yeah, but every character, you know, it's like I try to approach in a different way in hopes that you can actually improve certain things, you know, so I can discover a new method that can make things a little bit more realistic, or, you know. So in terms of the eyes, we're gonna just go back like very fast here in terms of the sizes, right? We already talked about this quite a bit. So just like a reminder, you know, it's like 24 millimeters or 2.4 centimeters for the radius in here. And then obviously like a real eye is not like a perfect sphere, right? You're gonna get a little bit more like long in a certain direction, but for all intents and purposes, for our rigging and all this stuff, we just, you know, create like a perfectly round sphere. And then the iris is basically like half of that. So like 12 would be like the size of the iris in relation to the eyeball. So if you look from a distance like that, right, it looks fairly natural. So it's kind of like a small size in relation to the size of the eyeball. But then obviously if we zoom in like that, it's gonna look like the iris is huge in here, right? But we're gonna keep like from a distance so you can actually see it's not that huge. It's like half that value. In terms of the construction of the eyeball, although I'm not going to be constructing a brand new one here, I'm going to show you. Actually, I can do like a rough version of it. I can show you. So, for example, one thing you can start doing, you can do like create a polygonal primitive. It can create a sphere, and then let's just bring this sphere here. Let's make it pretty big so I can actually work with it like that. And this one here, I'm going to do this. Look, I'm going to just crank this to like a very large amount like that, 60. Let's do the scale here at a round number to 110, for example. And then let's create another one, primitive, and this is going to be a sphere. Also, it's going to be 110. But then this, the divisions, we're going to try, let's start with 8 for both. And then for the height, we're going to add some more. So let's try 12. Oops. Oh. And then, so we have like only 8 in here. Let's actually, let's keep it 8 by 8 first, something like that. And then one thing that I'm gonna do here, I'm just gonna do, if I subdivide this mesh the way it is, you're gonna see something funny is gonna happen. I'm gonna subdivide one time here. So mesh smooth. And if I just smooth like exponentially like that, you're gonna notice one thing that's gonna be very funny. So this basically would be the front of the eye that we're gonna use, you know, it's like to, you know, to put like right in front of the cornea. But if you have like a star shape like this, you see like a bunch of edges coming from the same point right here. This is gonna cause some pinching, you know. It's like, so it doesn't matter how you subdivide this, Catmull-Clark or whatever, it's always gonna create some kind of pinching in there. So it's not ideal to subdivide anything with that topology in the first place. So make sure that you have a clean topology in the front here. So for example, easy way to do it, I'm gonna just select those 4 spots in there, 4 edges. You can do it in the back or not. I mean, like it doesn't need, because you're not gonna see the back anyway. But just delete them, right? And now if I try to do the same thing, the topology is gonna look much more interesting, right? Because you're gonna get like a nice little square right in the middle. And then I have like some 3 edge points in here, but those ones are gonna be just fine, you know, it's like when it comes like to the smoothing. Now, one thing you're gonna notice is that I went from a sphere, right? But because this sphere had very little support, right? We have just like 8 by 8 in here. If you subdivide it, it's gonna shrink and basically gonna look elongated. So it's gonna look like a long sphere, right? And that sucks. So we don't want that. We want to make sure that the sphere is completely round. So that's why I created that big object in the back in there as a buffer. So what I'm gonna do here is just gonna do like an approximation. Oops, 110, let's see, 110, there you go. So you see it looks pretty long. So I'm gonna do this, and then I'm just gonna scale back slightly like that. And then if you wanna make sure that's completely spot on with the one at the back, what you can do, you can click like the high res one, and then click the new one. And then basically like that's the source and then destination. And you can just go to mesh transfer attributes, and you can just click everything off in here. Just click vertex position on, and then you can just do like a world or even local. And then you just press apply. Oops, did I do the opposite? Oh, maybe it's because I have I still have history. So let's delete the history here. And let's try again. Oh. Weird. Am I doing it was supposed to be this one. Let's see. Oh, I think I have to, of course, I think I have to actually freeze it. So I'm gonna freeze and reset. Let's try it again. So let's go from that one to this one. Apply, now it snapped. Yeah, it's because I had to freeze the transformations before. So I'm gonna just delete the history now. And now if I delete this guy here now is pretty much like a sphere as well. I got like transferred to that, right? So this is basically like the model I start with. It's still, when you subdivide, it's still gonna look a tiny little bit long, but not as much as the other one, because now I have like 16 by 16 instead of like 8 by 8, right? So let's go like to the other models here, which are hidden. So let's try going right here. So basically, like you start creating your eyeball like this. And then I'm just gonna rotate 90 degrees, perfect right here. So we start like that. And then this guy here, in relation to the other one, let's see, like I said, it's probably still a little bit elongated, very tiny. Just gonna conform a little bit better like that. And then let's just go here. Obviously, you can keep your buffer object at the high resolution one at all times, so you can actually tweak things and make sure that it's always conforming to the round one. Not only the polygon version, but especially like the smooth version, because that's ultimately what you're going to be rendering anyway. But so right now I have the eyeball around here. And then you're going to create your measure tools in there by using the create measure tools and then distance, right? You're gonna make sure you have your units perfect in here, like under settings. Like you're gonna put like millimeters in there or centimeters, right? And you're gonna save. So you have like the perfect, way of measuring those things. So you're gonna measure like side to side the eyeball. Make sure you have 24. And then for the iris, we can create another object. For example, like let's get that object we just created, and let's duplicate it, for example. And then you're gonna do, for example, let's just like probably a little bit bigger than that. Let's see. If it's too bulgy, you can actually, like do a little tweaking to actually make less bulgy. But it's basically like you're gonna have to try to figure it out, like what's the best curvature. Because I mean, like I look at those references, and it's very hard to find like a reference of like a dissected eye. Because as soon as you start dissecting, he basically like deflates, right? Like I was looking at some pictures of eye dissection. If you have like a weak stomach, just don't look at it. So there's some models in here that are not real, but then you're gonna find some real ones. Like this one's pretty real in there. This one, right? It's kind of like they lose their form, right? Like I mean, like it's like it doesn't look like the same thing anymore. So it's very hard to see like exactly that curvature. The best way is to actually look at the pictures, like the close-up shots of eyeballs, right? Like the ones we were talking about the other day. And then when you look at those, then you're probably gonna find out that the refraction is actually interfering with the whole thing, and you cannot see exactly how much curvature that is there. But in my case here, I mean, like my eyeball here has like basically like I eyeballed the eyeball here. But if you want to make sure that it's like you want to go shallower, for example, you can do something like this. Let's just get the other one, and let's get this one. So basically, like you're gonna make a copy of it and just create this little offset and then measure it to make sure that you have around that amount that we were talking about here, like between like 12 and 12, 13, it's like millimeters in there. So there's a little offset right there, right? So now at this point, you can actually, either you can actually chop it and then merge the two of them. A way to do it, for example, if you get like this tool here, that's the cut, slice, and insert. That should be here somewhere, like mesh. Let's see. I never remember because they change everything every time, and I already have all my. So the multi-cut, right? This is right here in the mesh tools. So you can actually click right here with control. With control, you actually open this little, menu in there. So you can actually do a little bit further like that, for example. And then you can do the same for this guy here. It's just like, I mean, you guys know how to model stuff, so you're probably gonna approach like whatever way you want to do it. But yeah, in this case, you're gonna just like select, and then let's do it for this angle here. Delete those faces. And then now that I created that little loop in there, it's not perfect, but it's good enough. So let's try to do a blend. So I'm gonna click this vertex in the middle, gonna expand with Shift, and then, let's see, let's go back here, 11. Control F11 converts to polygons, actually. You can do that by going to select and then change things, right? The components. Components right here. No, where is it? Convert selection, this one. So you can convert. So I'm just using like Control F11, which is like select the faces. And then let's go back to this mode. And then if you got too big, then I just shrink a little bit. And then now you can actually merge the two of them. So let's go to Mesh Combine. And then you can just click like those little guys. You can just like press V and then snap them to each one of those. I mean, like it's just, you know exactly how to do this stuff. I mean, like you're probably gonna have like a faster way or something, but that's basically like the way I built mine, I believe, was something similar like that. And then once I have these ones all merged, I can just like, just like merge the vertices into place. And then I have a perfect representation of what I need in here. So V again, this guy here again, V, and this one V. Still have a couple, so this one, oops, V right there, and then the last one, this one. So once I have that in place, then I can just go to merge everything. So let's go to, let's see if I can find it here, because I have all the shortcuts that I'm trying to find in the menu for you guys. Let's see, we should be merge, this one. So merge, I'm gonna just go to like a very small number. Let's try this one, let's see. And then let's try to just subdivide and see what happens. So that worked, right? And now I have a little soft transition in there, obviously, but the soft transition, it looks a little bit bigger than that one, right? So you can try to, for example, maybe like reduce this one, double click and then reduce it a little bit, you know? And then obviously you're gonna tweak to your liking, you know? It's like if you wanna, like I said, like reduce this bulge here overall, you know, it's like you can actually, you know, play with it and see how you can get that to look better. But then the whole point here is to create an object that looks like this, that when you subdivide, you're gonna get like a nice little soft transition between those two elements, right? And you're gonna get a nice little bulge in here, which again is gonna be kind of like, you're gonna have to look at some references and see what works for you. So that's like an easy way to create the eyeball. Now I have more subdivisions in here. So probably for some reason, I decided to actually subdivide this. So if you do like a smooth with this guy, you're probably gonna get a similar amount of polygons right there, right? Before I go further, so the way I do UVs for those guys is very important to create the UVs in a way that everything is projected from the front, because you wanna make sure you're using like radial maps. So it has to be a perfect projection from the front. So what you're gonna do here, let's select the object, and then it's facing Z, right? Like the Z axis. So you're just gonna go to UV, you can go to planar. So let's see where it is, planar. Click the checkbox in there. You're gonna go to Z, and then you're just gonna project in here. So it's gonna show that little square, shows that it's projecting like that. So you can go over. It's the kind of stuff like when I do, man, I don't even think about it. And then when I try to explain, it's almost like my brain goes, wee. This is kind of like, so I'm gonna go to Windows Modeling Editors and then UV Editor. And now I have everything perfectly placed, like right centered, right? But the thing is, like the back is also there. So what you can do, you can always do this, look. You just like select this middle edge in here, or one behind. If you wanna hyper rotate the eyeball, maybe you're gonna see a little bit beyond the centered line. Then you can actually click like, let's say like this line here, for example. That's a little bit behind the center one. And then let's click this lady here. Where is it? This one. And then you can just go to your cut and sew, right? And then let's see, cut. So now it's cut. So what I'm gonna do here, just gonna make sure that I select the back. So we're gonna get, I can even select from the viewport actually to make sure we're selecting the right thing. So you select like one vertex, actually right click, select the UV, like that. And then here you can just control and right click, and you can say to shell. And now you press W to move around. And then you can just like detach that. So basically what we're gonna do here, just gonna shrink it because this is the back of the eye, and we just need a map for the eye. So we don't need, you know, a bunch of maps for this. Like this is gonna be very tiny, we're not gonna see. So just put in a corner like that, you know. This is what matters to us right now. And then from this point on, I can just like, made everything, you know, I'm unhiding everything. So one thing that you're gonna notice here, for example, my UVs, they're not perfect right there, right? So you can try to actually, let's see if it's gonna work for me, because this is like the bug that we have with those processors, the Threadripper, right? Is that when you try to do like an unfold, it kind of like breaks. So you have to do it kind of manually. I'm gonna try, let's see what happens. So unfold, I'm gonna click this option box. If I use the legacy, it should work fine, but the unfold 3D normally breaks it. So let's try. Oh, that worked because it's a very low resolution mesh, right? So it kind of worked. So let's see. This one doesn't have the option for pinning the corners. So like what's gonna do, we can do this, let's see. Let's just expand it. And actually let's do like select the edge UV shell, no. Where is it? We're gonna go control and then to UV shell border, I believe. Yeah, this one. So this one, and now I'm gonna reverse the whole thing. Let's see. Oops. Did I reverse? It's not reversing. Huh, weird. Okay, let's do it manually then. Let's do from the viewport. I'm more used to it. This from here. Let's select all the way to here. And then let's try to control U again to unfold. So now we unfold it, and then you actually got all those lines pretty much like round, right? I think the reason I subdivided my object is to make sure that everything in the UVs, at least like in the inner part, was very, very round, because I'm actually using a circular map in there, right? So a circular ramp, sorry, for transparency. So I think that's why I added more subdivision, just to make sure that it would not look like too steppy, you know? So I think that's why I did that way. So if I subdivide at this point, now my lines are pretty much like round, or for the most part round. And then the transparency should work better in that case. So basically like the construction of the eye was basically this, you know? And the important thing is that it's right in the center, because we're gonna be showing you some like some of the ramp stuff that I'm using to add the transparency to it. So if I move this guy down now, let's just do like a quick render of this. Let's do like move to this lady, put her on the side right there. And then one thing I can do here, so it speeds things up for you guys, something that I normally don't use for my renders, but in this case here, if you turn progressive render on, it's always faster to actually see the results straight away. It just refines it. I'll just like render one time and see what we get here. Oh, see, like it's converting some texture that converted to TX in there. It's one of the textures I forgot to actually uncheck the convert TX thing, you know, so it has to convert every time. So let's see. Oh, my samples are very low as well, like only 6. It's just a matter of like loading those. Oh, there you go. Interesting. I think there's something funky with my color spacing here overall. Yeah, I think this is not in the color space, it's not aces. That's why it's kind of like it's creating a mess in there. Let me see if I can fix this quickly. If not, then we can. So let's see, color management, default, texture, HDRI, sRGB. Okay, let's try to reapply rules to the scene. So if you open a scene that is not set for that, but it's like it's set in here. If you do this, in theory, you should reapply to all the objects in the scene, all the textures in the scene, and basically like assume that new color space. So let's try that first. And then let's see if it's gonna change anything here. Looks very saturated, everything. Interesting, it's reconverting it. Let's try to, yeah, it didn't change. Well, let's just like pause this. Let's look at a few things here. First, gonna be, let's see, Arnold render textures. Let's just make sure this is off. Auto convert textures. This one is off as well. Just gonna double check if those maps they actually have the correct color space, because this was made when I was using like the linear like sRGB, right? And so let's see, just like as a test, try to track this. Yeah, this one should be good. Now let's see this guy here. Yeah, it's linear as well. Interesting how saturated it's looking in relation to my, yeah, the previous times I rendered this whole thing. It looks very saturated right now. But let's do this anyway. So we're gonna be able to see it's just more saturated than I expect. I'm probably gonna have to tweak this color and everything. But the way it looks right now is like this. Look. Let's just isolate this one so it goes faster right there. Has a funky little color in there. You know, each model I just like keep tweaking things, but at least going to be able to see like veins and things like that, you know. So what's in effect here is basically like, let's say like 4 objects in this case. And then I believe this one is 4 instead of 5. So let me just check the object the way it is. So if I pause it in here, so basically what we have is this outer shell, which is the sclera and the cornea all together, right? And then we have inside a disc like this, which is fairly high res, like 56,000 polys in my case here, right? And I'm gonna explain why. And then we have the little black void in there. And then the last part is, see this guy here, which is just like the tear line that's reflecting right there, right? So let's go back here and take a look at how those things are working. Before I get to this, let's go back to ZBrush first. I'm gonna explain the construction in ZBrush. And I can pull like a little video in here as well, which is, let's see if I can find it right here. This video I always post for you guys to take a look. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's basically like a time lapse of the whole sculpt of the iris, like from beginning to end. And let's see here. Let's see if I can find it easily. Personal projects, then movies. So this guy here. So there's a time lapse, and then there's a reduced time lapse. I normally post like the full-on version that's like 12 minutes or so. So let's see, something like this. So the construction, I'm gonna show you how I did that. I mean, like it's just like using array in how you call like a symmetry array in ZBrush, just to start that. But then I'm gonna show you the geometry of this iris as well. So if I post this for you guys, you're gonna be able to see the entire process. In this case here, it takes about, that's close to 10 minutes. But it's basically like the brushes I'm using here are clay buildup, and then some regular standard brush. So like clay buildup for most of this stuff. So I start blocking some of those little canyons in there, like not canyons, but little, you know, it's like tunnels in there underneath, and then marking some of that, but not like out of my head. I mean, like I had an eye on the side, like as a reference. You can always get like something like one of those references you find, like those close-up shots that I showed you guys before. If you look like for eye macro photography, you're gonna get stuff, for example, like this, right? You can go like really crazy and add all those fibers and everything if you want to. But you're gonna find like there are many of those online. You can find, this one is a simplified version, right? I noticed that with brown eyes, you get more of this noise and a little bit less, you know, it's like fibers in general. And then as you go a little bit more towards like a blue eye, or, you know, then you get much more of those fibers and things get more complex in a way, and not so much, you know, of this porous surface, right? Very porous right there in this brown eye. Same with this guy here, very porous. Very different types of structures, right? Like look at this thing. Almost looks fake, right? And then this one as well, like lots of little creatures. Every time you get like a brown eye, you're gonna see this kind of structure. And then when you get like to a blue eye, you're probably gonna get more of this more complex structures in there. And obviously you can go to Texturing XYZ. They have like some, you know, awesome maps they sell, you know, it's like with the displacement and everything. But I like actually sculpting things just like for the challenge of it. So yeah, it's like pick one that you like, and keep in mind that, you know, some of them are gonna be very different in terms of structure. So this guy here, I keep going, and I'm just building like a brown eye, right? So it's kind of like adding some of the porous stuff, and, you know, at some point it'll be moved in there. But it's like a kind of beginning to end, just showing the entire process. And then I can show you like some of the brushes I'm using in there, and also the construction of this. So if you go to ZBrush, let's hide this guy here and this guy. So that's basically like the iris itself. And the way I started this, I just copied the eyeball that I have in there, the one that we just built. And then I basically like chopped it, and then I re-extruded the center area. So for example, like in terms of topology, it's fairly simple, right? It's just like it was basically a sphere before that I just flattened this whole area here, kind of like a flattened, got this front to be flattened, and then basically like extruded this in and then subdivided once more and baked it. But one thing you're gonna notice here is that you have this lip. So instead of like doing like a perfect end in here, I actually built some of those, ripples around it. So it kind of goes up and then goes down again. And then there's a second step again here. So it's like 1, 2 steps, right? And then 3 goes to the hole in there. So again, like looking at references, you're gonna find some variations for that. Sometimes this is a little shallower, but that's basically like in terms of visual reference for you. That's the way mine looks like. I'm probably gonna be resculpting some stuff at some point. My carunculi still looks like shit. I have to resculpt it. I'm gonna show you. But this one works for the most part. It all depends of obviously the types of shaders you're going to be using with it. Otherwise, a lot of this detail is going to go away. But remember when I was showing, like in Maya, I was showing the iris, and it looks very high res, right? And the whole reason for this to happen is that I was trying to avoid using the vector displacements. So if I'm not using vector displacement, and I have like all those ins and outs here, you see like things go in and come out again. So if I don't have enough geometry and you try to export the displacement map from here, for example, it's not going to look anything like that because it doesn't have enough support geometry to go inside. For example, from here, going diagonal inside of it, when you subdivide, like to be able to capture those little caves in there, it's not going to happen. So what I did, I actually subdivided all the way to around here, which is like 53,000 polys, right? And I exported this mesh straight to Maya as my base mesh. And then to export the displacement map from here, so I can recover those other layers to get something like this. Then you have to mesh the subdivision level, right? Like just like we did with the face. So if you have geometry subdivision, let's see, I go like 1, so subdivision level 2 here, 3, 4. So I'm at subdivision level 4. So the only thing you have to remember is to actually go to your subdivision level here, doing the map export, and just make sure it's 4, right? And you do the same process about like exporting the base mesh, re-importing it with the morph target, right? So use the switch morph target, and then you get a one-to-one representation of this back to ZBrush. But in terms of the construction of the eyeball, really no mystery. It's like it's a disk. And the reason why it's just a disk and not the full eyeball is because we don't need to see the full eyeball, right? We're gonna have like a transparency map that's gonna start like from here to here, and that's gonna actually blend this. So it would be like a waste to have like the entire geometry, especially considering I'm exporting something that's fairly high res at 53,000 polys. That would be a waste in there. So that's the only reason to export that way. And then for the void in here is basically like, it's just a simple geometry, which is basically like just a little shield, right? Just like a concave or convex if you look from the front. And it's just a disk with a black material assigned to it. And it's just blocking this area here. This one actually turns out is off rotation. Let's see. You should have to be kind of like this, like a perfect placement right there, right? But in real life, I mean, this is a hole, right? So for example, in this case here, this is not set up to create like, for example, a red eye effect, right? I mean, like we'd have to do some other tweaks in here to be able to accommodate that, because that would be basically like the light reaching the back of the eye, it's like with a lot of subsurface in there. So we are not creating this just by having a void, but the void's gonna work fine for things like, imitating like photographs, right? So you're gonna get like a black void right there. So in terms of geometry, that's all it is. I mean, like the last part is this one here we're gonna be talking about later, which is like a very simple geometry. And the way I do this is basically like, just like a 90-degree angle, right? And then basically like this one snaps to the eyeball itself, including the cornea. And then this one is going to snap against the skin. So when you're talking about this later, I'm gonna show you how I snap. It's basically like using this little magnet in here to make the object live, and you can just move those vertices and they basically like lock it to the surface. And then the one in the middle, it's kind of like halfway between the eye and then the skin around it. So basically it creates this little 90-degree angle. And then when you subdivide it, you get this nice little perfectly round surface. And then there's just like a noise bump assigned to it. So you get something similar to that, you know. So very, very simple. We're gonna get more complex with certain things and options I'm gonna give you guys if you wanna push things forward, you know. But let's look at ZBrush again. So the construction, you're gonna see basically like the, you know, by looking at the video, you're gonna see exactly what I did. But for the most part, it's just using that clay buildup. And you can use a clay buildup combined with the alpha, for example, and just like, really like the carving is a very, looking at the reference and then doing stuff like, you know, creating those little cavities, you know, from time to time, you can actually go with your carve brush in there. Just add those big cavities, you know, and then once you have that, then you can start carving towards, you know, it's like the, you know, another angle in there. And all this stuff is basically like just blocking. For example, you can start just by blocking things like this, just by looking at the reference, just the little cavities. And then you can come with the clay build up and just build around them. You know, like do that whole thing around them to create the little indentations. And then it's just a matter of like following what you're seeing, right? Like to create this kind of like, you know, ripple and stuff like that. Now to start it, the way you started those lines in the middle, you probably are familiar with, but I noticed that some people, sometimes they don't know it. You can just, if you have your object right there centered, you can go to your transform and activate symmetry. And by default, the symmetry is just going to be side to side. But if you turn on this things here, for example, like the mirror symmetry, and then also with the radial symmetry on, then you can put a count in here. And then when you sculpt, then you're basically like, it's going to sculpt like many things at the same time. Oops. So for example, like the large intensity. So right in the middle in there, I started with something like, you know, creating those little lines, a lot of them, and just like starting like after you have just a few of them just to define a certain thing, then obviously all the other stuff are going to be blending them with some clay build up and not a lot of symmetry that's going to be completely asymmetrical, just to blend them so they don't look like perfect lines like that anymore, right? So it's just like blending them into simpler forms, or, you know, just like see, like, turn off the symmetry. So this one here, for example, right, blended with the other one, this one blended with this one. It's just like this kind of stuff, you know. So it's just like a starting point in there. And the reason for this ripple around is also because of those references, you know. It's like every time I look at them, seems like there's some kind of like ripple that happens right at the edge, kind of like this, you know. So you can see there's kind of like a little leap in there. So there's a lip, and then there's a lip in this one right here. For example, you look at them, right? Looks kind of interesting. So see, like there's like a couple of little cuts in there, and then some ripples. And it's interesting because it's a little bit more elevated. So there's a combination of this transparency you're going to be using in there, but also there's another thing that happens is, depending on the angle of the light, is going to cause a little bit more of a shadow around it, right? So it's kind of cool. But you're going to simulate this with also the shaders, so I'm going to be showing that as well. Now for the corner itself, oh, again, this one is going to be also for the UV, is going to be like a front projection, just like this, just like we did with the eyeball, because we also going to want to use like some radial maps, like gradient maps, so you can actually you know, it's like add some gradation between those colors and get some variations without using a ton of actual maps, but mostly like using like procedure stuff. And then obviously if you want to paint maps, like some eyes have like very specific dots and stains and things like that, so especially like the blue eyes, you're going to need definitely some hand painted textures in there, more than the brown eye, which is a little bit more plain. So so that's basically it for this guy. Then the eyeball itself, it's the same construction with the same UVs we had before. And then if you subdivide here, you're going to start seeing all those little veins. And I mean, like the way to create them, it's for the most part, if I just switch to, let's get the, for example, like a standard brush. And I can use the standard brush with like a focal length a little bit smaller than 0. And then, for example, if I sculpt it with that, you get something like this, right? It has a little bit more of a sharper edge around it. And then you're going to define that sharpness by playing with this focal shift in here. If you're going a little bit more soft, right? And then the way I started this is basically like painting a very generic color at first. So if we get something generic, like let's say what color I have in here. So if I pick something around here, right? The color I have in there is like 156, 108, and 102. And that's gonna be basically like just the color, just painting like with the plain brush, right? And then for the other ones here, I started introducing some yellows around here. So you're gonna see some very pale yellows. So I'm gonna start like adding more white. Obviously this whole area is gonna be more visible, right? And then more whites, and then more yellows around here. Very desaturated stuff. Some of them pretty close to the cornea area in here. You're gonna also notice that those veins, they get really close to the cornea, but they never go over it, right? Imagine like if you had veins over your cornea, you would start seeing things very distorted, right? Like if you had like any imperfection in the cornea, any bump in the cornea, you would see things very like completely, you know, it's like deformed, right? Because it's basically the lens. Like if you have a deformed lens, you're gonna see everything distorted. So it has to be always like crystal clear. So to create those veins, the way I start blocking them after I had like, you see like the texture itself is so generic. It's just like the same technique we used for the face yesterday with those large, you know, it's like spray brushes. You can create a lot of that just with large spray brushes, right? And then specifically with the yellows, you're gonna go with the, you know, with the standard brush with a very low intensity, maybe like 2 or 3, and just introduce some of those yellows if you want to. Depends on, you know, what reference you're looking at. Some people have like very yellow eyes, like there's some conditions like related to liver, for example, right? Sometimes you're gonna get a lot of yellow in there. And then another thing that I do, I can contrast those things and change those colors using radial maps inside of Maya. So even if I don't have all the yellow I want, I can shift this whole stuff in here towards yellow later in Maya. All I want to do is always like have like a generic thing I can play with, and then in Maya I just go to town with those settings. Now for the veins, there are a couple of things that I used in here. So the first one is going to be like using the regular carve brush, so like a standard like this. And then obviously if you're sculpting in ZBrush, you know, you can sculpt and paint at the same time. So if you get like a red color like that, for example, if I paint anything here, I'm sculpting and painting at the same time, right? So let's do this with a smaller tone and then like less intensity maybe. So if I do something like this, right, I'm gonna start like blending towards those little veins. So some of those, like the small ones, the ones that look very crappy in here, I kind of did that way. Let's make it even smaller. You know, it's like you can, and then basically like just branching, almost like treating them as roots, right? Like it's almost like a little root. So just like, and try to add a little, you know, shakiness as well as you sculpt them. But you're gonna see those ones that look a little bit more square, they're actually from a little map that I did. So like every time I get like those smaller ones, I try to get a little bit stronger with my intensity here, right? Some of them, some people are gonna be a little bit more like on the, you know, it's like almost like super dark. You can play with like variations of size, you know, it's like pressure, and then make a little bigger and then smaller like that. You do that kind of stuff. And then if you want to save a lot of time, use that trick, like use the transform, activate symmetry, use radial, let's say like 12 times or something. And then you're going to sculpt like, you know, it's like the same thing many, many times, right? If you do anything here, it's going to repeat. So you can do some of that, you know, it's like some of those ways, but without being too close, you know, it's like to each other, right? Just maybe like 8 copies or something, just to save yourself some time. Now, there is one brush here that I use. Let's see if I can find it. I never find things. Let's see, it's the vein, micro vein. This one, no. This is not the micro vein. There's another one that's a vein brush. Let's see, ultra veins, this one. So this alpha here, and basically I thought about like what would be cool to sculpt veins with. And I thought like, what about lightning, right? Like if you saw the shape of lightning, I mean, like it's so cool because you have basically the same structure, right? In nature and in the human body, you find lots of very repetitive patterns, right? Like it can be the same as for the roots of a plant or for the veins, right? It's the concept of fractal, right? It just breaks up into smaller and smaller chunks. So I found this picture of lightning, which is really cool because at night it's all like black and then with the white for the lightning itself. And then in Photoshop, I just color corrected it and I cropped it and I brought it in here, made into an alpha, right? And I added a little bit of radial fade, I believe. So there's a little bit of, let's see. No, this one doesn't have a radial fade. I can actually add a little bit. Just tweed up a little bit of the edges. Maybe like something around, let's see, 3, something like that. And then now, if I sculpt something with that, I can actually play a little dance here with all those little veins. And then obviously try to add some variation, right? If you're sculpting like some large ones with low intensity, use always the same thing, you know, it's like use from time to time some smaller ones, and you can start actually from the same spots, you know, it's like just to branch out of it. Let's try from here. And then you can get a lot of detail like in no time, you know, it's like all this stuff goes really fast to do if you do that way. And then obviously it's going to be a matter of like how you're looking at your references and how much of them are going to get like really close to the sclera and how many are not, right? But again, like this stuff, I can actually remove some of them just by using the transparency map at some point, you know, although our transparency map is just effective from here to here because we have just a disk in there. So starting from here, if you start making things too transparent, then the disk definitely gonna show, and you don't want that. So again, like this is a very simple thing to do. You know, it's like those little passes. Really, you can do this like very fast. But again, like it's not like I spend a whole lot of time doing some of the things I did for my models. And it's a lot of them I have to go and revisit and do like much more carefully, you know. But if you look at the results that I have in all my renders and everything, that's basically what I use, you know. So in terms of result, you still can get very realistic results, but there is a shitload of room for everything. Anything I do in this class, you can extrapolate like add like a ton of more complexity to everything, you know. This is just like hand painted or you know, stuff not based on photography, so or you know, texturing from photographs. So basically, like, you can definitely do a better job than I'm doing here. But the thing is, like, when you sculpt, it's important that you're sculpting and painting at the same time, because you want a perfect match between the color and the displacement, because you're definitely going to need displacement for this, right? Otherwise the eye is going to look like a piece of glass. You need to displace it so it breaks up the specular and looks more realistic in the reflections. Just avoid the center, obviously, for the reason I mentioned before. For the displacement here is the same deal, right? Like, go to the lowest, or if you're sculpting, or if you're exporting like a higher res version of it, go to the subdivision level you need to do, and then make sure when you export your displacement maps, you're matching the subdivision level in here, right? Just make sure that it synchronizes with whatever you have in Maya. So in terms of the eye, that's basically what it is. And then for the carancula, here is going to look, it's so crappy. Look at this texture. It looks like crap, right? And the reason why it looks like crap is because I was just like, okay, how much more work I need to do? And it turns out that I didn't need to do a lot, because I'm actually desaturating this whole thing and shifting the color towards a little bit more pink in Maya. And then there are a couple of things happening here, actually. A lot of this is going to be more even. So it's going to go towards like a color like this. So you're not going to see strong reds or anything like that. You see, I have plenty of room in here. I could add like for the veins to have volume. So that's the reason why I want to redo this this object. You know, it's like it's pretty bad. I mean, like it's not good at all. But it's the same one I use for all my characters, and it works. You know, it's just like it can be much better. It's very, very cheaply modeled. I admit that. So what's happening here with this guy, there's a little pocket there I didn't realize. Just bring this up. It's basically like it's a watertight object. It's because like it doesn't work great when you have like something that is just like a shell for the subsurface scattering to be calculated correctly, right? Because this guy's gonna have to have a nice subsurface scattering. I'm just like making things a little bit closer to the eyeball, which is not a necessity. I'm gonna show you why. It's not so necessary to make it perfect. But yeah, so basically like the concept in here is to actually blend those objects by using some transparency map in between them. But not only that, we're going to use a transparency to the geometry itself, which are two different things. One is called the transmission, and the other one is called the actual transparency of the object, right? The geometry. And I'm going to show you why it's important to use both instead of just one, right? So basically, like in terms of the eyeball, that's all I have in here. It's those three objects. And then you can actually go with this one a little bit more, a little closer to your cornea. And the thing is, like, I keep it very, very close to the cornea like that, because that way I can actually use a very slow blend transparency map. And then it's going to start like disappearing straight away. And then it's probably like, depending on where you stop the transparency map, you're going to see just this little chunk or a little bit more of it, a little bit more. And the cool thing about using the transparency map here is that whatever veins you have in both objects, they end up like blending. It's almost like you get like a two layer of veins in there. Like it's very, very cool. And it's very subtle too. So in terms of the UV for this guy, let me show you what I have in Maya. In Maya, I have this UV right here. Let's see. Let me just unhide everything. I have the correct, yeah, right here. So if I click one of those, look at how simple it is. So basically, like, I projected the center, chopped just like a little bit the eyeball, and then just like grouped it back. And I made sure that it was like a vertical placement, right? Obviously, I could make this completely square. I could, for example, like manipulate my UVs to have all the lines perfectly square, right? I could, you know, like do something like this, for example, like 1 by 1. I could like make things like completely square like that, right? That would be like a perfect base like transition between the colors, right? But that would be a little bit of overkill. I mean, like it don't need to be completely perfect, but I mean, I could, you know, it's like if I was a little bit more pristine with the work here and not a mess, I would be doing something better. But it's in the plan, guys. I swear, I'm gonna do better next time. It's been only a year I'm using all those objects. So that's basically what I have for transparency. So again, like this guy here, the maps is basically like completely centered, right? This one is the back of the eye, so it can be very tiny there. For this guy here, also very much in the center. It has to be completely centered. And then this guy here is just like a vertical version of it. And then obviously I could go like just like use the entire area since it's a map just for it, right? But for some reason, I don't know, laziness, I suppose, I made it very tiny there. But let's look at how those shaders look like. So the shaders here, you get like, you see like there's the little transition in here, which is basically like a transparency map that's actually going over the edge of the, let's just hide this one so we can see that one. So basically like this edge right here, it's covered right there, right? And then everything else here is hidden behind the sclera. So in terms of how what's the relationship between them? If I look, let's get that guy, for example. They're all the same, but so you can actually look at multiple things at the same time. If I make it transparent, you see how the way it's nested in there? If I divide it, you're gonna see there's a tiny little bit of a gap, but not by much. I mean, like it has to be pretty close to the edge right here, right where we have that little, you know, it's like a volume at the edge of the iris right there. It has to be really pretty much against the eyeball in here without intersecting with it. So it has to be really close to that. So that's the relationship you need. And then if you have it close enough, that's gonna naturally create a little bit of a shadow and a refraction kind of thing in there. And then, and also with the transparency added, you're gonna get this nice little glow around it, right? So that's basically what you want. Some people are going to see a little bit more of a transition. Some people is a little bit sharper. I kind of like the milky transition particularly. I think it looks nice. So let's look at the shaders now. Let's break down those shaders. And the shaders can get a little funky because I use some different nodes in Maya to actually correct colors and stuff. But let's start with the cornea itself. So the cornea and also the sclera, right? All in the same object. So I'm using like a subsurface at 100%, so with like 1. So that means that we ignore the base. That's not being used. I'm using those values for the specular level, so like 0.750. The roughness is almost mirror. If you go to 0, it's complete mirror. So this is a little bit less than mirror, so 0.020. Index of refraction, 136.0. So let's talk about the index of refraction. So if you get something like this, let's see, this guy here, let's double check. Something like this, you know, it's like this little reference here shows a couple of different refraction indexes in here. So for example, like inside of this bubble in here, so there's water inside of this, right? You're gonna get like, you know, this water is index of refraction of about like 134, but then you have some thickness in the cornea itself, which is kind of like a membrane, right? Holding the water inside. And that membrane itself is about 138, right? And they kind of like, they blend together. And then, so instead of like using one or the other, I kind of averaged to 136. That's basically what I did. And it gives you like a nice result overall, you know. Now, in one of those classes, I think it was like July last year, I did for my wife model that I was sculpting. I actually created a model similar to this. I actually extruded those walls inwards to create that little volume. And I basically, like, I matched this. I put like 138 in there. And I created a little bubble really against this, you know, it's like pretty close to it. And I added 138 and I rendered it. And it's like the result is so minor difference that I got in terms of comparing the two of them, that I decided to just abandon it, you know, because 136 is working fine. You know, it's like, it would be like something very, very minor in terms of result. You can try it actually. But I thought it would be overkill, you know, it's like, and also there is more risk of introducing some more artifacts. You know, it's like you would have to have like more surfaces crossing, like the light rays would cross more surfaces, and probably like you could get some artifacts potentially in there. So just like, you know what, they're gonna just simplify and remove it. But that's basically what's the principle, you know. So that's why I'm using 136 in here. And then and this I added at some point, I think I was testing it, and I ended up like, instead of like using the plain spec, I actually use a little anisotropy here, but it works. I mean, like when I look at it, it seems like it introduced a little bit of different type of spec, you know, and a lot of stuff is based on the reflection here anyway. So yeah, you know, you can play with that and see if you find it useful. That's basically the setting I use, and it works for me, you know. For the transmission, this is the trick in here, right? Oh, actually, I forgot to mention the color of the. So this is like, it's basically white, but not pure white. So the spec is like at 0.899, so like 0.9 basically, right? Although I'm using color management, so that's why it's going a little funky in there. But yeah, it's like 0.899. And then for the transmission itself, it's where we're gonna plug our circular transparency map. So in the past, I was using this other shader here, which was like, if you look at the Maya 2D surfaces, you have a ramp, right? So I was using the ramp before, and you can actually make the ramp black and white, and it works just as fine, right? And you have access to, for example, if I click this ramp here, see, like I have access to different types of things. I have like this ramp, and then I have like a circular ramp, which is the one we need, right? But the thing is, like, when they updated Maya, Arnold at some point in one of those transitions, this has stopped kind of working the way it worked before. Like the transparency was not looking the same anymore. So instead of like using this map, I started using this other one here, which was the Arnold. So the AI shader. So we have this, let's see if I can find it here. Sorry, utility. Is it utility or texture? Let's see. I think it's utility. So let's go AI ramp float, right? RGB would be like for color, but then float would be like for transparency, basically, like for black and white. So I'm using this ramp float, as you can tell by looking at this one. So you just click the little checker in this one, and then you pick that shader, AI ramp float, right? Which is that one I have right there. And then you switch it to circular. So I have like all those options. I think starts with the U or something. Just pick circular. And now the way this thing works is like this. Check this out. Let's get rid of this one. Let's do a little quick render here again. And let's try to pick that specific guy right there. So you're gonna see, for example, like this transparency that we have right there at the edge. Let's get maybe something like that. And then let's just make it a little bit bigger so you can see it, like that. And then we're gonna play with this ramp right here. So basically, like this is gonna be dependent on how your UVs are set, right? Because we're trying to basically like in the universe of the full space of the UVs that I have for the eyes, like you saw, like there's a circle there in the UV space. You have to make sure that you can find where is the transition point between this area and this area, right? So at this point here, I have, in my case, 0.2097, and this one is 0.2984, right? Now let's try to move this stuff around. Look what happens. I'm starting to actually add a lot of, it's like transition in there. And at some point, you're going to start seeing, if I keep going with it, you're going to start seeing the object underneath it, which is the, that disk that we had. See like the edge of the disk right there? Right. So you have to find what's the sweet spot. So for example, it's going to be dependent on your map. So right here, I'm actually revealing the whole disk inside of it. If I go all the way back here, then the transition is very tiny. It's just like that, right? So you're going to have to find where is the sweet spot where you're going to get that transition. So, it's like, it's cool because you can see almost like interactively, right? And then here is basically like if you make this transition here very sharp like that, then you're not going to get that nice little, it's like kind of like a milky transition between the two. And it might look a little fake, although in certain people, you're going to find some of them have like a smaller transition like this one. So again, like you're going to use your best judgment. The important thing is to actually find where this transition point is. Because if you do something that's too short, for example, like you do the transition starting here, then all of a sudden, like your iris got much smaller, right? So like now it's way smaller. So it doesn't matter like that you model everything perfectly in scale if you're actually eating part of it by using the transparency map that's too strong. The same way, for example, if you're bringing towards here, and then now all of a sudden you're actually growing the iris by doing the transparency much later. Let's go. I think I went too far. Let's see around here, for example. Right. So now you have like a gigantic iris in there. And sometimes I do this as a cheat as well. It's like sometimes if I want the iris to look a little bit bigger, that's exactly what I do. It's like I just tweak this and then exaggerate the size of the iris instead of like having to change the model itself, just because I model in a way that I have a little buffer in there. So yeah, so that's the way the transparency is going to work with those two guys, right? Let's just stop it right here. And now let's talk about this other little guy here, which is more important. Oh, by the way, let's explore what's the attributes of this object. So if you click the object itself, Control A to go to the attributes in here. And then if I go and I look at the Arnold, you're gonna notice that opaque is off. By default, any object you create, the opaque is on. So make sure to turn it off so it can actually produce like transparent shadows, right? Which is cool. I mean, like you don't want a lot of the opaque shadows for this object in there, since it's in front of other stuff. And then everything is on in here. I have my shared SSS attribute placed in there because I want to make sure that everything blends perfectly. Subdivision, I'm using 4 subdivision levels, Catmull Clark, object and linear. And then I could potentially like use a UV that's actually, instead of linear, pin borders and just like smooth internally. Since I'm using a circular map, a ramp, I think it would work better actually if I use this one here. But at the same time, if I use this one here, it's going to go against what I did for inside of ZBrush. In ZBrush, everything is linear, right? So I'm actually trying to keep linear mostly because of the veins, not so much because of the map itself. But again, if you have a model that's fairly high res, like this one is subdivided once more, then the circle for the transparency map is going to be fine, you know. So you don't need to worry too much about it. But I want to show you guys this guy here, like the carbuncle itself, right? And then after that, we're gonna talk about all those shaders. So the carbuncle is gonna be a similar setup. So if I look at the object in here, it's like I'm subdividing only 3 times. And then this one is also opaque is off. Make sure that it has nice, also has the shared SSS, right? And a displacement map assigned to it. Now, the cool thing about this one is that, let's just go back here. Let's move this around here. You're gonna notice like this nice transition between the 2 objects in there, right there. So if I hide this guy here, you're gonna see what's happening behind it. I can even hide this one here, let's see. It goes completely transparent. If I hide this one here as well, you can see it. It goes transparent against the background right there, right? But not only that, there is something that's very important to notice here, is that the specular is going away as well, right? So that means that it's not only that we are creating a transmission map, you're actually making the object itself transparent, which is very important to create a perfect blend between everything. I think that's very key, you know, it's like otherwise you never get it right. So let's see. Where is it? Oh, there you go. So to create this perfect transition between the 2 things, you have to create both like a transparency for the map. You just let's see. Where is it? This one. Let's get the transparency right. The render just right here. We can actually see. So like I said before, I mean, like we have a layer of veins in this object and another one underneath it. So it's kind of nice because it blends together, you know, get kind of like a different layers in there. But let's look like how this thing is set up to create this effect of like, not only like becoming transparent, but like killing the reflection as well. So, which is important. I mean, like you're getting reflection from this object, you're getting reflection from this object, let them handle it. And then just like, basically like if you're blending with this one, so the reflection from underneath here from the sclera itself is going to show through it, right? So it's kind of like that's the hope in here. It's like as it gets more transparent, it gets more reflection from the object underneath, and it just looks nicer, you know, overall. So let's look at the shader for this guy. So before I do this, guys, sorry, I'm trying to go like all over the place here at the same time. Let's just finish like talking about the you know, the rest of the shader here for the cornea. Sorry. So we have like the specular I already went through. I show you the ramp that we plug for the transmission, right? For the coloring here, I'm using 0.0822, which is, I think is like, it's basically like full white, but I think it's because the color management. Let's see. Yeah, if I click full white, it goes to 0.822. It's really color managing based on the Rec 709 in there, but it's actually full white. And then if I go back to subsurface, so my weight for the subsurface is all the way to 1. The scale for the skin is around 130, 0.130, but I'm using a little bit higher for the sclera, so 0.150, right, based on my tests. This slide here, I'm actually using for my old lady now as well for the skin. Every time you put like a positive number in here, you can actually increasing the subsurface, like the front scatter. And then every time you bring it down, you're increasing like the back scatter. So it's like, if it's 0 is right in the middle, you're getting the same amount of scattering from the back and from the front. But if you want to exaggerate the effect sometimes, you know, you can actually shift this to one side or the other. So for the skin and for the eyes, I'm shifting a little bit towards like front scattering, a little bit more than, you know, just basically like 10% more front scatter. And so that's basically here. And then let's see the surface color. What I'm using is basically that map. Let's look at this one here. See, it opens up. Right, so that's the map from ZBrush. As you can tell, it's all like linear. See, like it's completely square at the borders, right? And then it's basically like, that's why I have to match the same type of linear UVs in Maya, otherwise it doesn't work. And that's the back of the eye right there. Then for the coloring here, there are a lot of stuff you can do with color all the time. So color balance, for example. So color balance by default uses like 0 for offset, so black, and then use a color gain of 1 or completely white, right? But in this case here, I plugged something in there. Let's look at what that is. So if I click that guy in there, so this one here is a ramp. It's a circular ramp as well. And it starts with black and goes all the way to whitish. So that means that I'm actually making things a little bit darker towards the center of the eye. And just imagine that this is basically like it's completely transparent in here, right? But if I'm using a little bit of black in the center, that means that there's a transition that's going to happen, kind of like in the middle in here. I'm kind of like trying to force this area to have a little bit more of that halo, that dark halo around here, because the transparency is going to eat up around here. But if I have a little bit of black, that's going to help with that effect around the iris, you know. So that's the reason why I added a little bit of a circular map right under the color gain, right? So we can do all kinds of stuff. I mean, like if you plug in here, you know, procedurals, whatever it is, you can get all kinds of different results. So, but my intention is to actually make the center of the sclera a little bit darker, because I know it's going to go transparent. And if I have a tiny little bit of that black left in there, that's going to give me a little bit more of the halo effect in there. So let me get back to the other stuff. So the radius. So for radius in here, instead of like using a plain color like I'm using for the skin, in this case here, I'm plugging the same map again. So it's the same map plugged in there, but sometimes I change it. So in this case here, apparently I'm using like a completely full on the same map. So that means that those colors going to scatter in different ways. Like the white part's going to scatter white, right? And the rest going to scatter with different colors. So that's why I plug in the map in there. Sometimes I shift those colors to get a little bit more desaturated. Or for example, the color gain, I can shift towards like a, you know, it's like a peach color to get more color in around the white of the sclera, right? So you can actually play with that. But in my case here, I'm just plugging the map itself in with no changes apparently. And the exposure, I cranked the exposure just a tiny bit from 0 to 0.010. It's the kind of stuff like it's visual, you know, it's like you just have your screen rendering on the side and then you do little tweaks here and there. It's part of that, like, you know, it's like a never ending process of tweaking things at the end. Normally at the end, when you have everything pretty close to where you think it would be cool, then you go over everything and you try to just give that tiny little boost in everything. So it's probably part of that process that is left in there, you know, it's like tiny little tweaks. So and then continuing here, I'm not using any coat, that's 0. And then for the geometry, I'm not using anything as well because everything comes from the displacement map. So all the veins are being displaced. So there's nothing in there. And then for the advanced, I have caustics on, which is on by default, right? So caustics has to be on in there if you want to create any impression of caustics reflected to the iris later on. So that's basically it for the shader for the eyeball. And now let's switch to this guy here. So this is going to be a similar pattern. So instead of like using a base, right? I'm going to just check, for example, if anytime you use the subsurface, if it's 1 here, that means that this is going to be ignored. So base is not being used. For the specular, I'm using like full on 1 for it. I don't have a spec map for this object. I could potentially create one that, you know, to be able to control things a little better. This one I made a little bit more wet. So it's like the eye was like 0020. This one is 0010. So that means it's a little bit more mirror-like. And the index of refraction is matching whatever is in the eyeball, so 1.36. And then transmission. So for the transmission, that's the first part is just the transmission. So the first part is going to be like this. It's a ramp map, and you can tell it's a V ramp map, right? It's a vertical ramp map. So we can actually, when you look at the UV layout in here, you want to make sure it's vertical because that's the orientation of my object, right? What if I had like a place like horizontally? Then you would switch this transmission to a U ramp, right? And then you would create that effect going that direction. But in our case here is a V ramp. And then again, it's a matter of like trying to find that sweet spot where the transparency is. So let's look at this render again. If I can find it here. I wish it was showing all the names for the windows in there. So let's try this, see where the eyeball is. And then let's look for this transition right there. Around here. Let's get this guy going from here to here, something like that. A little smaller. And then let's grow it around there so you can see it. So if I expand this ramp here, it's going to be the same principle. If I move this stuff out, let's see this one here. I actually have to see what's happening with the other side. Let's move this around here. Let's see. Changing, is it the same object? It doesn't seem like it's changing for some reason. Let's see. Huh, it's not going transparent. Maybe I have the wrong object. Let's see. I got this guy here. Let's go to transmission. Oh yeah, it seems like it's a different one. Yeah, I was looking at the wrong shader. So this guy here, I probably messed with some other one. Oh, no, actually it's the same. It's the same one I was playing with. Why is it not showing any difference? I don't know. I know what might happen. It might be that all those TX files that we had before, although this one should not influence that. I mean, like this is just like a ramp. That's puzzling. Let's try to break this. I'm gonna break this connection. I'm gonna recreate it so you guys can see anyway. So this is basically like the fully transparent version of it, right? Just gonna click this guy here. And let's add utility AI. Maybe the reason is that that was kind of like a Maya shader that was left in there. So I'm gonna click the AI ramp float. And I'm gonna go, yeah, it's basically like vertical, right? That's basically what we had. So yeah, that was not actually a Arnold node. That's what I was talking about before. You know, it's like something got broken between those transitions in there. So you see, like from here, now I can calculate and you know, visualize that the transition between the two things. But it's the reverse in here. It's not going transparent that way. It's the opposite, right? You just bring this one back in here. And then now I can actually bring this forward until I find a sweet spot where it covers that gap. We cannot have a gap in between here, otherwise it's gonna look weird. Just gonna see through it. So you're just gonna find it by going back with both slides. So around here, then I start getting a very nice transition between the two objects in there, right? Now, this is just the first part of it, is to actually plug a map like this that I can actually, you know, it's like to create this effect for us. But this doesn't do the whole thing, because if you don't have anything plugged here under the geometry for opacity, then it's going to look funky, because sometimes you're going to get like it's still the specular happening. And if you still have the specular happening, remember when we were looking at the ZBrush, we have this lip right here, right? There's a lip. Let me turn off this thing around here. So this lip would catch the specular. It would look very weird. And the thing is, like, I want to make sure that this overlaps the eyeball because I want to create this nice transition and have those veins in multiple layers in there. So for me, it's much more interesting if I can actually mask and remove the specular for this entire area right here. I'm not too interested in eliminating the specular for this area, but definitely from this, right? So that's why I'm using another transparency thing, but instead of like a transmission, I'm using this geometry here. And the way it works is the same. I mean, like you plug a map in here, and then this map actually you can control. Let's see if this is gonna work or not. This one is working. This is a Maya map. It's working. So I don't understand. I don't understand. It's working for here, but it's not working for the other one. Or maybe the other one I needed to switch to alpha actually under the color balance. Maybe I have to. Maybe there's nothing for switching to alpha. Weird. I don't know. That's why I prefer using just the Arnold nodes at this point. You know, it's like I'm not trusting those old Maya nodes anymore. But for some reason, this one still works. You know, under the Maya stuff. So you see, like this one here. If I turn off this thing, so now you're gonna have like you see, like the object is going all the way here, and you're probably gonna start seeing, depending on the angle you look at, you're gonna start seeing a little reflection right at the edge of this object in contact with the sclera, and I don't want that. So that's the whole reason I'm actually adding a transparency for the geometry itself. The cool thing about this is that you can make a geometry transparent, and when you make it transparent, even the reflections go away, as you can tell right there, right? So I'm gonna click in here somewhere. I'm gonna make this one black. And now you can actually play with this. So for example, here it's completely transparent around there, right? Like this. So basically we have to reverse it. So I can actually bring this one here and that one back. And then I can find that sweet spot where is the transition between the two. And I know that once it reaches that, everything becomes transparent, including the reflections after that point. You know, if you need to play with a different shader, for example, just like like a gray shader, so you can see exactly where things are, and then add this node to it, then later just replug this node to the new, you know, to the actual shader you're using, then it's an option as well, you know. But this is basically what makes the renders look nice, you know. Let me get this, just a second. Get this rule. Even like in this old, let's see. Is this something I can use here? Yeah, even in this old, oh, this one's not the high res one. Like this is an old like render I had, but you can tell like, you know, it's like it really works. It's just like, in his case, I think I made it a little bit shorter. This is like one of the first, and this is still a little bit saturated back in the day, you know, but the transition, it really works nice. Yeah. So let's get to the rest of those shaders in here so we can get through it. Ah, he doesn't want to go away. There you go, closed. So let's go to the rest here. So that's like, we went through the specular. We spoke about specular, the transmission we spoke about, and then we went straight to the geometry. So let's look at the subsurface. Subsurface for this guy here, I'm using a plain color. In my case here, it's gonna be a little weird for you guys because it has color management, but that's basically the values I'm using. With 0 to 1 looks like this. But I mean, it's gonna be by feeling, right? Like you notice that today, for example, I desaturated the color of the radius for the old lady and still got plenty of scatter in there. So it's a matter of finding like a color that actually works for you guys. For the scale, I'm using a little bit less scatter than the rest of the eyeball. And the reason why is like those walls are so thin. You know, it's like I left this kind of like it's almost like a membrane that's so thin. So I kept the scale a little bit smaller. So 115, which kind of matches a little bit the scale of the skin itself. And then for the subsurface color, I'm playing with this thing a little bit. So you remember, like by default, this looks like absolute crap, right? Like the model, the painting looks like this. It's very saturated and weird and not enough detail. It's very gross representation of veins in there, right? But the thing is, like, I start playing with the saturating things here by first, like if you play with the exposure in here. Let me just like save this view store so we can actually compare with this one. So if you change the exposure of the map, for example, you can go very dark, right? So you can get like a very dark carunculum there. If you go up, same thing. That's the way those maps work, right? If you go like that, you get like a super pale one, and then you're seeing the subsurface scattering full on in there. So again, like visually, it's depending on the character you're modeling. I mean, like you can visually just like tweak this to kind of match closely what we want, right? But then there's this offset in here as well. And the offset, sometimes instead of like offsetting, just introducing a little bit more white to it. In this case here, I'm introducing white and more towards like a saturated orange kind of thing, you know? And then basically like the way it works is like this. If I switch this to something like purple like that, you start introducing more purple to the whole thing, right? Like that. So in this case here, I'm using like a very desaturated color, but just using a little bit of more towards orange. Again, like visually looking at it and seeing what works best. And then obviously the lighter you go, the more desaturated everything becomes. So sometimes you can get like start with a crappy map like the one I started. And just by playing with this, you start like overriding it, washing it out. So that was my intention. It was like, okay, like I'll just wash it out and basically like level the whole thing just by using some of those controls. So, until you get something that kind of blends with whatever character you have in there. So that's basically how I colorize that. And then let's see, under coat, in this case here, for some reason, not sure, I'm using some coat, and it's quite a bit of it as well. So I have like the specular full on at 1, and I also have the coat. Ah, weird. Well, it's working for my scenes, but probably like in the future, I would just do some tweaking, maybe like not even use that much, or maybe use a different roughness. I think I'm trying to use like a 2 different sizes for the reflection. So we have like 002, and this one is 0010. So like this is 5 times bigger. So it's just instead of like having a very sharp reflection, I guess the specular itself is acting as a secondary spec, and this one is actually acting as the primary. But yeah, that's basically what I have in there. Don't ask me why, but it's there. And then for the geometry I already spoke about, that's basically the opacity map that we are plugging in there. And then this one here, I don't have any caustics. I shouldn't have like any internal reflections either. It doesn't matter. But the caustics, it's like only if you want to, create a tiny little effect of caustics between those 2 geometries. But think about it. It's too much work, and it's like too much like render time increased for nothing, right? You're not going to get that. You're probably going to expect the caustics to come from this little guy here only, right? And kind of like leave it alone around there. So that's the shader network for this little guy. And then let's look at the last one. Is the one that probably has the most things plugged to it, which is the cornea, the iris. And the reason is not because it's a complex thing, it's just because I'm too lazy to paint a decent map. And that's basically like what stuck, it's like I just had this map that's like, it's awful. Just like this guy here, that's so bad. I have this guy here, which if I show you the map, looks like this. Like if I show like just the plain color, it's like almost nothing, right? It has this kind of like a ochre baby poop color. And then I have a little bit more dark painted around it for that purpose as well. It's like always trying to incorporate some of that little halo around the iris, around there. But just like I did with this guy here, the intention was, okay, I can do something in Maya and color correct this whole thing. Because since I'm gonna do like a brown eye, in this case here, I don't need to have a ton of like spots or anything. You remember the references I show you guys is like pretty much like a spongy kind of plain brown in there, not a lot of stuff going on. So that was the intention. So I had this very crappy map. I believe I selected by cavity just to have a little bit of, little glow around those things for, I don't even know why, just maybe incorporate some more stuff in there. And then in this case here, you see like I have like a little bit more like redness around there. There's a little bit more green around here. And it's something that I plug in here. I'm going to show you the maps I have plugged. And you see that the cool thing here is that you see some of that volume, right? Like you see there's a little volume in there that's helping to create that little lip. And the lip actually goes and creates a little bit of the shadow around it. So let's take a look at those shaders in here. So for this guy, what I have plugged, I have the base here, in this case, is being taken into account. So in this case here, actually, I switched to complete subsurface. Surprising. Well, so in this case here, ignore that. So I'm not going to use base again. So specular, I have like a 600 here for the weight, right? But the roughness is at 200. So let's crank this one here. Let's see what happens. Nothing happens because it gets more diffused. Let's go smaller. And then things going to get very shiny, right? But let's see. It's not looking very shiny because there's a lot of noise in there that's breaking up all this thing. Let's try to increase this by a lot. Let's see if it shows something. Yeah, I'm starting to see some reflection in there now. Let's crank a lot so you can see it. That actually there is a reflection, right? But the thing is, like, I want to make sure that you don't see too many of those forms. Remember those reference pictures we are looking at? I mean, like, it's not like you see a lot of where is it? Let's see. See if I can get one of those eyes here to visible. So those guys here, right? Let's see if the brown ones we can find. Uh-oh, what happened? Oh, there you go. It's just slow. So those ones, right? There's not a lot of color variation going on here. You see a little bit in there, but this might actually be attributed to the caustics effect. You know, they got a little bit more like that. But overall, like for those brown eyes, I have a lot of them very spongy looking, and not a lot of complexity when it comes to color. Let's see where are the brown ones. I have a lot of stuff saved apparently. Yeah, not here. Very fast. Let's see. So that was one, but not the close-up ones. Let's see around. This one, right? It's like it has some tints of green in there in the middle, but it's not like a huge variation. And this one is pretty much like a plain color. It's just very spongy, right? So that's why I think this one especially, very, very plain color, with the caustics just like breaking some of the surface. But you see, in terms of the specular, you don't see a lot of specular, right? You have to remember that those guys are underwater, right? They're kind of like underwater, and you don't have a lot of, it's like one of the things when people do renders to look like things are underwater, they have to eliminate a lot of the specular, right? Because you're not going to see a lot of speck under the water. Yeah, in this case here, I eliminated a lot of it. I still kept the speck, but I actually increased the roughness quite a bit, like 200. And then this one is like 1.55. And then I'm actually colorizing a little bit instead of like having white for the speck. I mean, just using a little bit of this tan color, right? Just like it adds a little bit of the speck just to be able to inform some of the forms a little bit more, right? Otherwise they get a little bit, it's like too plain. And then, so this is the specular, and then no transmission because it's not transparent. And then for the subsurface, I have 1. And the scale is very tiny. So what happens here is that if I increase this scale to something bigger, let's say like what we use for the skin, 135. It starts to get a little bit like, especially when you get really close to these guys here, look how red they get very, very red, because it's trying to scatter based on that scale. And those are very, very tiny details. So either you can actually turn subsurface off altogether and just use the base, this one here, right? So you don't use scatter at all for this. Or in my case here, I'm just using like a tiny little value. So I can actually make this look more solid, but still have a tiny little bit of subsurface scattering just to be able to accommodate those tiny little details. You know, I still see a little bit of it, but not too much. For the color is that crappy map that I have, which looks like this, right? Straight from ZBrush. And then what's happening here is that I'm tweaking this map a lot. So basically, like I have my exposure in here, I can actually bring it, I'm bringing it up actually. So I'm cranking to 0.867. I can crank even further so you can see it's gonna get brighter and brighter, right? And then you can go down to make like a really black eye like that. So I'm having like visually trying to find that sweet spot that I liked. So in my case here was around there. And then I'm tweaking all the colors in here by using a couple of ramps, I believe. So for example, like the color gain, if I look at this one, so I have a circular map, and the circular map has a bunch of colors assigned to it. But the thing is, like, if you assign those colors too saturated, it looks like real crap. So you have to go like very, very discreet with them. So for example, if I crank this red in here to something more saturated like this, so the center looks very, very red now, right? So I have to actually use something that's very minor, just to get a little bit of that nice transition. And then the next one was kind of like a green, but very desaturated as well. If I crank like to a full-on green, you're gonna see where it is. This is that area right there. Right, so I'm gonna just undo it. And each one of those is basically like placing them and checking things. You know, it's like normally starting with a very saturated color just to see the placement. So this one is around the edge itself, right? And then now that I know the placement, I can just undo it and just like tweak that. Okay, I want a little bit, tiny little bit more green, very desaturated, you know, a little bit of more blue, whatever it is, you know. This one, maybe I can go even a little bit less saturated because I think it looks a little bit too red right in the middle. Something like that would be a little bit better. So this is what I'm doing for, this is actually a Maya shader node, by the way. This is not from Arnold. I could be using an Arnold one. I think I should switch everything to Arnold eventually, but there is still some of them that come from old models. And then this was for the color gain. Let's see if that's all we did here. So color gain, yep. And then here for the color offset, I have this map here, which in this case, I don't think is doing much. But let's say if I crank the second one here, let's see what it does. So it's bringing everything around that area towards like, you know, it's like whitish, right? If I put white in here. Same for this guy here. Everything's gonna get whiter in the middle, right? So this is the color gaining here. You can actually use this one in combination with some color, for example, shift it towards like blue here. Obviously, the structure of the blue eye is not going to be the same like I talked about. I mean, just the fibers and everything are going to look different. But let's say if you want to do like a quick cheat in here, you could potentially do something like that. And then just don't saturate too much. But, you know, it's like maybe introduce some color. It's kind of like an alien looking eye at this point, you know. But it's another option to just like, you can play with those colors in there. I think I left this one as a placehold for anything I needed to do later. You know, it's like if I wanted to bring some of that, you know, a little bit more of a whitish tone around that transition or keep it completely black, something like that. So at this point, it's just like plain like that. And then let's see what else we have for this guy. We have effects. Let's see, nothing here. And then Arnold itself, nothing. Yeah, I think that's it. So going back here where the shader is, so subsurface, we went through all those values. Now the coat, I'm actually using a little coat as well, and also introducing a little bit of this yellow. I think it was kind of like the intention was to actually simulate a little bit of the caustics effect, but you know, not simulate, but just add a little bit more of that stuff. And this, the roughness is very high at 700, 0.700. If I go lower in here, you're gonna see more and more reflection. But the thing is, like, you're not seeing a lot of the reflection because I have a lot of noise applied to it. So let's switch this like back to 0.700. And my weight is actually very low as well. But let's look at this here. Look, under geometry, I have Dick Smith. So it's like, it sounds dirty, right? Dick Clean. It's a Dick Smith shader. So this is the noise I have assigned to it. It's a regular noise from Maya. And those are the parameters I'm using. Basically, like this regular noise thing. So like, if you guys want to copy whatever you want to do, you know, it's just like a visual reference here. I'm using a lot of frequency, 400, and it's the type of noise is Sperling noise. And that's basically like all the parameters I have for it right here. So if you go back in here, you're gonna notice that the depth is very high. So if I go to 0 here, things gonna change quite a bit. Check this out. Now I'm starting to get more and more reflection in there, right? Because I'm actually not using a lot of bump. So this one here, now I can actually see things. So let's go to this one we are playing with before. And let's crank this. And then bring this one down. It's gonna get pretty mirror looking. Right? So get all that stuff in there, basically contaminated from the environment now. I mean, like I like using this one, like if it's the iris, a very high value, so 0.700 definitely to actually make things very diffuse. And then the weight here, you can actually play with it. You know, it's like maybe I don't even need that noise that much. I think I added the noise just to get a little bit more of those little craters in there, but I might have gone a little bit too far because with this guy here, as you can tell, the model itself already had a lot of that noise baked into it. And you're not even seeing the HD in here because I actually went HD, I believe. So if I press A around here, that should render with HD, which is kind of like, it is a little overkill, you know, because it's, you know, I could definitely resolve the thing with just the noise itself, create a nice noise and do it. But I actually added, you know, there's a little bit more detail here. Look, it's taking forever just to generate the preview. So you're not missing a lot by not seeing that. So yeah, at this point here, I have my roughness at 700. This one 194. I had like, I think it was 150 before. It doesn't quite matter. It's just because I changed the noise. I'm just showing you how those things work. You guys can figure it out as well. So if I bring this weight down here, let's see, 0.5. Now I get less spec. Maybe we're gonna keep something like that with a little bit less noise, you know? So at least I can get a little bit more of the form without having like super strong specular, you know? Maybe I can increase this one to 300 so it's even more diffuse, more rough. I think it's gonna look nicer overall, you know, just to have like that. And then for the noise bump, I can just use maybe like a very tiny value, like 0.01. Like that, just introduce a little bit of noise. But again, this is going to be all concealed under the eyeball, like the sclera and everything. So it's going to definitely change quite a bit. So let's expand this. Let's see what's hidden in this one. So now getting some caustics in there, right? Because we're getting, see like how much the brightness changed, right? Between having this in there and then having just this one without the eyeball. Look how much brighter it looks with it, right? It's because of the caustics that actually creating this whole area in there. Now the caustics, one thing you have to notice is that you know, it's like it's dependent on a lot of stuff, right? And we mentioned that before. Either you're using like an HDRI map or to light the whole scene, or you're using like a mesh object, a mesh light. Otherwise, if it's just like a plain area light, the area light doesn't have a switch to turn it visible. And it needs to be visible, you know, like to be able to create it. Now, there's another thing here that I forgot to mention is that if you're going for caustics, and I'm actually surprised it's working because to my knowledge, you need to have, in this case, if you're gonna use caustics, you need to have your eyeball Arnold settings set to from opaque, from not opaque to opaque actually. So they say like if you want to create the caustics effect, they have to be opaque. So I'm surprised they actually worked without that, but maybe they changed something, I don't know. But I'm gonna keep opaque just for now, just to make sure that actually, you know, that's the old way it worked. At least I know it works like that. And then other thing about the caustics is that if you're gonna render with caustics, make sure you have enough samples for the transmission and the specular, right? I don't remember if it's just the transmission, but I think the specular you're gonna need to have some more as well. So for example, if I do like 4 and 4 here, or 5 and 5, something like that, that means like you're probably not gonna see a lot going on here because this is very noisy and there's a lot going on. But if you put this eyeball against a solid plane, for example, just a gray plane, and you do this test, you're probably going to see more and more definition in the caustics, you know. So you're going to see them pretty much like showing a lot of detail, you know, kind of like when you look at it under the water in a swimming pool, right? You see like all those caustics and stuff. This effect, I mean, like if you don't have enough samples, you're only going to see something very noisy, kind of whitish noisy. And then if you have enough definition, then you're probably going to see a much nicer result. Obviously, if you crank the camera anti-alias, it basically like multiplies everything and everything gets better. But still, you know, it's like I would, if you're planning to use caustics, I would keep some of those values, especially like specular and transmission, slightly higher than the other ones. So when you multiply with the AA, basically like they get a little bit more quality to them, you know. And obviously it increases the render time, but I mean, it's something we have to deal with. It's like everything is a compromise, I guess. So let's try this guy here again. And then let's see what's missing for this shader if I forgot anything. Let's see. So caustics, internal reflections, which not necessary, right? Just like, I don't even need caustics for the iris itself. I mean, if that's what I'm looking here, irises, yeah, I don't need caustics for the iris. I need caustics for the object itself that's around the iris, to create the iris, like basically like project the caustics into it. But I don't think I need the caustics to be produced by the iris itself. I think it doesn't affect it, you know. Now let's look at what happens if I turn off the caustics of this guy here. Let's see if it's actually working or not, because I'm still questioning it. Yeah, it's actually working. So check this out. If I turn it off, then it goes pretty dark, right? If I turn it on, definitely caustic is getting caught in there. So that's working. And I think that seals it for this object. Let me see if I forgot anything. So I have those ones. Oh, the last part is the tier line, which is a very simple object. Like I said, it's nothing. And that one, actually, we're going to be explaining the model part when we have the model in here, like when you're actually adjusting it, like the old lady, you know, like with everything in place. So right now it's rendering like this, right? Just create that tiny little line of water in there. And I mean, it's another one of those cheap models, you know. It's like when I created it, I wasn't paying too much attention to things. So it's very cheaply UV'd. You can do like a much better job for sure, which is like, look at this shit. Again, it could be completely like square, right? Like if you had this thing like completely square, for example, let's say, maybe that's a chance for me to do it now. So if you had something like this, oops, I got the wrong one right there. There you go. So something like this, and then let's just like turn the subdivision off. Let's get this one to here. Let's do this. And then this one, let's do this. So if you had something like that's a square like that, the advantage of having something like this is that I think you would work very nicely. Is just try to imagine this with me for a second. So try to imagine this. So if you had like a transparency map assigned to this, right? Let's say it's impossible to create like a perfect transition between the sclera and the eyelid itself, right? But let's say if we assign, for example, like let's pretend like instead of this, actually you can do even like a different way, like really expand this into something that's has more space between them, like that. And then you can have like, for example, a V ramp, like a ramp just like we assigned to the rest of the stuff. starting, for example, like white in here. So basically like transparent in there, or black, depending on how you're using it, with the invert node or not. And it can have like a transition, for example, like transparent geometry, not only transmission, but geometry from here to here, and then from here to here, and then the water just in the middle. And then you would have like a perfect transition between the skin and this object here. And you know, it's like from the eyeball to this object as well. Just using the technique, you know, it's like, because it's going to eliminate the specular and everything. So you're probably going to have a perfect transition between all the objects involved. But it's just like something to think about. You know, it's like, it might be overkill. It works fine the way it is. But if you really wanted to make like a perfect transition, I think it's something that you could consider, you know, just as a suggestion in there. Let's see. Let's go back to geometry and just like undo this stuff before I destroy it. Go back to my cheapo UV so I can actually show you the rest of the shader. There. Okay, so that's my cheap UV in there. And then let's go back to the shader stuff. And then, so this one here is actually also very simple. So again, like I don't have any base, right? Like it's completely off. I think not even subsurface, so off for base and subsurface. So it's because it's completely transparent. Once you go completely transparent with something, let's say transmission here. So if you have at 1, you're gonna see I'm gonna bring it back. And now this slide is, I can actually tweak the subsurface, and I can tweak the weight for the base, right? But as soon as you go transmission full on transparent, this goes away and that goes away. So that's why it's completely transparent. So specular is at 0.760. Those are kind of values that I test for my models, you know, it's like, and if it works, it works. But I always keep room for tweaking. So for example, like if in a certain model, it's too much, I might actually tweak it, you know, it's like depending on the environment I'm, you know, trying to render with. Obviously over time, I'm trying to create something that works across the board for multiple maps, like I did with the African warrior. But at the same time, it's not perfect, you know, it's like from time to time you have to tweak. And even in production, I mean, if you guys work in production, there is always like shots that are tweaked for that specific shot. You know, it's like a shaders tweaked for a specific shot. They do their best. They spend months, not like us here, like spending like a few weeks or even days working shaders like that. These people like work for months in production to create something that looks really cool and is working like under different environments and everything. As soon as you put like in a shot that has an unusual kind of lighting, it just doesn't quite work. They have to do some tweaks. They have to, you know, the supervisor is going to say, oh, can you increase a little bit of the specular in here? And then you have to do it, you know. It's kind of like you're following the directions from a VFX supervisor. And so nothing I'm saying here is set in stone. That's why I always keep like completely open to make it work for my own, you know, character for that specific shot that I need to render, you know. So that's basically it. But you know, a ballpark, that's all I can do for you guys. Like this is a ballpark, that's what's working for me at this point for this specific shot, right? And then I might have to do a few tweaks here and there to make it work for some other specific character or shot. So specular 760, roughness, it's a little bit more, a little bit less mirror than the eye itself. And I think I was kind of getting a little bothered by looking at the reflection and being too sharp. And I decided to just increase a little bit more just to get a little bit less sharpness. So it has a little bit of blur. It's almost like the water is slightly dirty, right? It's almost like the water has a little bit of milky kind of reflection to it. And the use of refraction, I cranked this one. I don't know exactly why, but let's see the difference in here between what a 1.6 and 1.136 does. But I don't think it's going to be, for that tiny little thing, I don't think it's going to change a lot. Let's try 1.360. To tell you the truth, I think this is not like even my concern for the you know, the specular itself. Is actually I'm cranking this probably like to get more of the reflection going on. So it's kind of stupid, right? Because I could simply crank this weight here a little bit more, or even like use the color and crank the color, because I believe you can go further than this. I think you can go up as much as you need. I think it passes 1 actually. You see, like I can go super reflexive with it, right? So I can keep it like at 136 to keep like the how you call like the refraction correct, and just like play with the weight and the color. Like I said, the color, you can actually go up and down beyond 1, right? You can go like and really add more reflection or less. So, you know, find the sweet spot for it. And now the whole trick here is to create a little bit of this watery effect. You see, like it's not like a perfect reflection. It's not like a mirror, right? Like there's a little bit of a wobble in there, some ripples. So let's see how this thing is working here. So transmission, no maps, just full on. You would use a map just if you want to try to do that thing that I mentioned. You know, it's like kind of experimenting with doing a little perfect transition with some linear gradients. I'm not using any code in here. And then for the geometry, I'm using the noise. So for the noise, the amounts I'm using here, it looks pretty much like this is a noise shader from Maya, like a texture, 2D texture from Maya. And then I'm using, again, the Perlin noise, and then the frequency is only 12. You see, like the trick here is to make it look like there's a little bit of more irregularity between the, you know, those things. So it breaks up the specular. But if you go too high with the frequency, for example, if I go like, let's say 100 here, then it gets like very, very, it's like super ripply, right? You cannot even see the reflection. It's gonna get like let's try to stop this one and then go back right around here, just a little spot. So you see, like it gets like you cannot even see the reflection. So that's why you have to break up enough. If you go 0, then it's just like this plain line, right? That can look quite fake sometimes. So just enough to break that with larger ripples. So let's say around here, it's already not a straight line anymore. Let's see, this one. Around 20 in there. It's not a straight line. It already added some ripples in there, some bumps, right? So it's a matter of like finding what's the sweet spot again, you know, it's like by playing with those values. But it's definitely like a larger noise overall. You can use a displacement as well, you know. So if I go like very small, then it's gonna get like pretty much like mirror looking, and that's not ideal. Let's try something like, I think something around here is pretty good, like 12. Right, so get some of that breakup in there. But yeah, so let's see. It's kind of all combined in there. Yeah, man. So that's basically what I had for eyes. I thought I would have to, I would have more time for the texture stuff. But I mean, like we have still like 2 weeks or a week and a half at least, like full-on stuff, and a lot of stuff are going to be revisiting, you know, and coming back and going to be speaking about this one when you put against the model in there, when you start sculpting this around the model. And then I definitely going to go back to the maps themselves and then talk about the specular and the bump height maps. Kind of like the way that I painted, you kind of have an idea already, but I had to get this eye stuff like out of the way so you guys can actually start like working on the eyes, you know, it's like sculpting the iris. It's a cool exercise. And like I said, I'm going to be posting the video, the same one I show you guys. This one is going to be, not this one, but yeah, that one I show you, the time lapse, going to be posted together with the class. I know I promised yesterday to actually post the color stuff, like the albedo, so you guys can see in relation to what we saw in the video. But the thing is, like, I'm not even close to done with it, and the color is very plain and boring at this point. So I'm going to be working more on that, using the same techniques I was showing you guys yesterday. You know, it's like lots of noise with like a tiny little, you know, adding things slightly, you know, it's like every new pass until I get something that looks less plain like this. And then definitely going to explore like the little painting of the little black dots everywhere. You know, it's like add some black heads as well. And yeah, so all that stuff is coming as well. Make sure you guys are not in the dark with it. But yeah, for now, I'm gonna consider this one out of the way, like the eye stuff. And then obviously any questions you guys have, I mean, like, it's gonna show up, you know, it's like sometimes certain things don't work exactly like it works for me here. I mean, like, although I'm doing real time with you guys and showing exactly the results of everything I'm changing, sometimes, you know, it's like maybe the color correction is different for you, or something, you know, you missed a tiny little detail because I'm just like throwing a lot of stuff at you guys every day these days. So make sure that you rewatch, you know, it's like if you got a result that's completely different, and rewatch to see where exactly could had gone wrong, you know. And then obviously if you still have the question, I mean, like, just post it and we can try to resolve the problem, you know. A lot of guys like from the previous classes are experienced with this stuff and can chime in and help, you know. It's being a little overwhelming for me, like just as a single person trying to do the whole thing, like keep an eye for the group, because we are like close to 300 people now, you know. And then a lot of people are posting. Obviously they're expecting to see more and more stuff, and I'm trying to, obviously it would be nice if I had like a separate forum for you guys, for example. I used to have that in the past. It was just a forum for that specific group, and I would focus on just that. And then someone started suggesting, oh, let's mix everything because it's cool, because you get inspired by each other, blah blah blah, you know. And then end up like mixing the whole thing, and then it's very hard to keep focus, because you guys should be the ones getting all the focus for that kind of feedback right there. And meanwhile, like people who bought the class like a year ago, you know, it's like, obviously that's what I want to do. I want to help people as I can, but at the same time, it becomes like a giant snowball, you know. So I apologize for not being on it all the time, but I'm gonna try to at least like with you guys, you know, it's like if you post something there, I'm gonna try to actually give some preference. So, all right, dudes, keep rocking, keep working on it, and we see each other tomorrow.
Thank you, Chris.
Stay safe, guys.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Good night, guys. Or good day, right?